There's this guy named Todd, and he sells chicken fingers. And last year, he made $3.7 billion doing it. This is a wild story, and I spent 3 hours digging into it. This restaurant is called Raising Cane's Chicken Fingers. I'm talking about the founder, Todd Graves. He's got 700 locations across the US, bootstrapped the whole thing, very, very little capital raised. It's a private company, and Todd owns 90% of the business. I'm going to tell you exactly how he built it and some amazing lessons you can learn from this business model, from this story. So let's go back to 1996. Todd's a student with a dumb business idea. That's what his friends are telling him. That's what his professors are telling him. But he's got this idea anyhow. He wants to open a restaurant serving one single thing: chicken fingers. But he's totally broke. Guy's got no money, and no one's going to lend him $1 for this business. So he goes ahead and takes a few dirty jobs, and these are really dirty jobs. So Todd works as a construction worker, moves from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, down to Los Angeles, gets a job at Boeing, and works as a construction worker. Pretty dangerous, dirty job, actually. Then he goes and becomes an Alaskan fisherman, goes onto these boats in Alaska. These guys earn a lot of money, but it's a very dangerous job. You could die. But this is how bad he needs to raise money. This is how hard he's working, gets the capital, scrounges up enough cash, and he's about to turn his deep-fried dreams into a restaurant reality. So let's fast forward here. 1996, Todd opens his little chicken joint in Baton Rouge, and he names it after his dog, Raising Cane. On day one, there's a line out the door. Now, keep in mind, this is a college town, Baton Rouge, and these students want their chicken hot. They want it spicy, and they want it right now. So they opened the restaurant. They actually were working up to the very last minute, like 6, 7 p.m., and finally they just opened the doors. No grand opening, no signs, nothing like that. And people start trickling in, and then what happens is around 2 a.m. or 3 a.m., they get this rush of people because after the clubs, after the bars shut down, people want fried chicken. So they ended up staying open until the wee hours of the morning, and that's kind of how it went for a while. They would open the restaurant, I guess, at like 9 or 10 in the morning, and they'd be open until 2 or 3 in the morning that same day. And the interesting thing is they were working so much, and Todd himself was working so much, he actually slept there. I think he said they rented an apartment right next door to that first location, which he built himself. He built the location, he renovated it, did all the work, and then leased the apartment next door because he knew he wouldn't have a chance to go home. He's there working literally all day and all night. Now, 18 months go by. Todd's been grinding away in the kitchen, and then he opens a second location, not that far, kind of across campus in Baton Rouge. And again, the lines are still growing. There's a lot of room for growth here. So he opens a second location, a third location, a fourth location. He's using debt and sweat equity to fund growth. I'm going to talk more about the growth funding strategy in a minute. It's very shaky, but it's working. And within a decade, he's got 150 locations. So let's just go a little deeper here. How is this dumb idea working so well? Well, Raising Cane's is breaking all the rules of restaurants. First of all, it starts with this bare menu, super bare menu. There's 4 things on it: chicken fingers, crinkle cut fries, Texas toast, and coleslaw. And yeah, if you want to be a purist, they got the cane sauce, and yes, they have drinks, but really, it's the fingers, the fries, the toast, and the coleslaw. Those are the core items. Compare that to 50 plus items, sometimes up to 100 items at any given location of McDonald's. But less choice means you can do one thing really, really well. These guys make chicken fingers, and they do it better than almost anyone. Plus, this restaurant is a community magnet. Fast food spots typically need to spend big money on advertising, promotions, discounts, specials to get people in the door. Raising Cane's doesn't need to do any of that. They just open the doors and sell chicken. The community does the rest. And let's talk about that community, because when Todd started, he started with one customer. Baton Rouge, college town. Raising Cane's was all about college students. But he quickly noticed other people coming in the door. Families with young kids would come in. Church groups, tourists, Little League, office workers. They'd come in, because they enjoy the simplicity, the convenience, and they would travel far and wide to come into Raising Cane's for this famous crunchy chicken. So he started to notice all these other people coming, and he expanded the horizon. Now think about this for a second. If you're opening a restaurant targeted to one group of people, and all of a sudden you start seeing new segments coming in, new types of community members, you all of a sudden start to realize, wait a second, there's a bigger opportunity here. Watching the customer, figuring it out, that's how Todd started to notice that this one restaurant could be a lot more. In fact, somebody in the comments when I posted the story on LinkedIn said, what separates these companies from the ones that are stuck at like one or two locations to the one that scale to 100, 200, 500, 1,000 locations? The answer is obviously there's a lot of differences, and I'll get into some of them in a minute, but recognizing the customer appeal. If this was just appealing to college kids, then there might be a much more limited set of growth opportunities. But there's a lot of people that like this stuff, and the community building was a big part of it. He saw the mass appeal, and he used it to catapult growth. Now let's get to the good part here, because underneath this crispy coated golden crunch is a cash gushing machine. Raising Cane's brings in over $4 million a year per location, and that is a ton of money. Second only to Chick-fil-A, which I think brings in like 7 or 8 million. McDonald's is like under 3 million per location. So $4 million plus per location at Raising Cane's is a lot of money. And they have decent margins because of scale and simplicity. Again, they're not worried about sourcing a ton of different ingredients and a ton of different stuff. They have a very finite menu. Scale and simplicity. I think they buy something like 900 million tenderloins a year. That's the part of the chicken they use. I'd estimate they're operating at a net profit of about 13%. They save on training, they save on labor because they're making just one thing. Again, 900 million tenderloins a year across the system. Plenty of room for growth. 700 locations, what they have now. These other restaurants, McDonald's obviously has like 25,000, 30,000, some crazy number. But even like Popeyes and other fried chicken joints, Chick-fil-A, some of these places you could easily have 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. So it's not hard to see how Raising Cane's could double or triple from where they are today. A lot of people don't even know the brand. It doesn't have the national recognition of a lot of these other national brands. So a lot of growth ahead. Take all these things, put them together, and that's how you make $3.7 billion a year selling chicken fingers. I told you guys about this on LinkedIn. Hundreds of thousands of you saw it. Lots of comments, lots of spice. Let's go to the comments section. This guy named Gary Druckenmiller wrote this comment about how Raising Cane's is part of a very big problem, the fast food regime, which is quickly decimating our country's health. If Todd wants to get ahead of things, he should start making healthy fingers, change the oil, flash fry instead of deep fry, bring in organic chicken, don't sell soda, etc., etc. All right, so here's my comment on all the people that are thinking, okay, this is a cool business story, but isn't this damaging to the consumer? Here's my take on that. There's supply and there's demand. And cause and effect is an interesting thing, because you could say, well, people are eating it because it's available. But do you not think that if it wasn't available, people would find some other way to eat it? I mean, look at Prohibition. Back in the 1920s in America, people couldn't buy alcohol like they can today, and they still figured out a way to make alcohol. People couldn't buy weed for a long time. They still smoked plenty of weed, right? Drugs, alcohol. When people want something, when society wants something, they're going to get it. So I don't know that you can put the cat back in the bag. People know what fried chicken tastes like, and they know that they like fried chicken. Now, I personally don't eat much fried chicken. I don't think I eat any fried chicken. I can't remember the last time. So I'm not the target customer here, but there's a lot of people that want this stuff. So when you say that the supply shouldn't be there and the people who are supplying it are doing harm, I don't know if you can make that argument with fast food, fried chicken, because it's not like people can't make this stuff at home. If there's demand for it, then supply is going to be there. So appreciate the comment. And yeah, I'd recommend people watch their consumption of deep fried foods, but I'm not sure that the problem is the restaurants as a whole. I think that if people want it, they're going to go get it. Let's talk about this comment from Chad McKenzie. I always find it fascinating how some brands are able to open multiple locations while others will maybe have one or two at most. So let me be clear about this. I think this actually has a lot to do with the entrepreneur. Yes, you have to have a concept that works. You have to have timing. You have to have a unit economic strategy. There's a lot of stuff that has to go into it. But aside from the timing and the good fortune, actually coming up with the business model is the entrepreneur. Because I'm sure that when this thing started, Todd's initial business could not have scaled. I'm sure he learned a lot along the way. I was listening to a conversation, an interview that Todd Graves did, and he said, when you have one or two or three locations of a restaurant, you are not making money, especially with a quick service restaurant. You're losing money. So the only way to make money is to scale. Now, what do a lot of people end up doing? They run an unprofitable zombie business for a very long time. Most businesses, especially something like a restaurant, you guys have heard me talk about it. A single restaurant or a 2-restaurant business, that is a terrible, terrible business. The only way to make money in the restaurant game is to scale. Because when you have economies of scale, you can save on food costs, you can save on labor, you can save on rent, you can do all these kinds of things. Let me talk about specifically the funding strategy that Todd used to scale, because I think this is something that you could do today. In fact, I've done it, and it is a very, very smart and crafty thing to do. At the beginning, I'm not saying you do this later, you'll see why in a second. So at the beginning, what Todd did was he used cash, of course, to open the first restaurant. Maybe he raised a little bit of money, I don't know. Second restaurant, how do you get from restaurants 3 to 10 or 2 to 10? Going from 2 to 10 is very hard. Once you have 10, you have other challenges, but the grind gets a bit easier. So here's what he did in the early days. He would go out to angel investors and he would say, listen, don't give me equity. I don't want you to be an equity partner in my business. I want you to give me a loan and I will pay you a 15% interest rate. You give me, let's say, $100,000. You lend that to me. I will pay you back 15% interest and I'll pay you back a bit of the principal every single month. That's step one. And he said that loan is subordinate only to the bank. And what that means is this is at the top of the stack. If anything happens, you have the collateral of the business, and maybe there's even a personal guarantee as well, with one exception. The bank comes first. So if I go to the bank and I get a credit card or a line of credit, they have first dibs if things go wrong, and you have everything else. And this is very common. Anytime you do private lending or private borrowing, I've done a lot of it, any private money is subordinate to the bank. The bank is always at the top of the stack. This is why banks do not lose money, because they get their money back first. So he's got these private lenders lending him, let's say, $100,000, a few $100,000 at a 15% interest rate. Then our boy Todd goes to the bank and says, hey, I'd like to borrow some money, and check out my bank account. I've got all this money here right now. And he would use the money that he borrowed from the angel lenders as equity. So as far as the bank is concerned, this guy Todd has actual money. He's got a business. Even though that money in his bank was loaned to him, the bank doesn't need to know that, right? So think about what he's doing here. He's borrowing money from two people, totally legal. So I'm going to borrow money from one guy. I'll pay him back the money. I then go to the bank and use the money I just borrowed and tell them, I have this money. Can you lend me more money? So he's almost like building a deck of cards on a deck of cards. But here's the linchpin. He had a strong cash flowing business. So by the time he did this, I think this was location 3, he started to do this. He already knew, as soon as I start making chicken and selling the chicken, there's going to be lines out the door. I've already been doing this now for a couple years. I've got locations working. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. He was able to scale 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 restaurants each time, borrowing money from an individual or a group of individuals, 15% interest rate, then taking that money, going to the bank and saying, look, I've got this money. Can you loan me more money? And then he did that for a while. It was up until Hurricane Katrina. So I think it was 2005 when he actually ran into some trouble, because the restaurants that he was operating and relying on that cash flow to come in and pay the bills. And then what started to happen is those restaurants shut down and the cash dried up. And all of a sudden, he had a bunch of debt that he couldn't pay off. Now, fortunately, they came together. His team pulled through. They opened the restaurants up before too long, and they were able to keep the cash machine running. That's the problem with debt, and that's especially the problem with debt on debt on debt, is that if your cash dries up and you don't have reserves, you can run into problems. Now, why do I love this funding strategy, and why do I think it's important to know, especially if you're a small business owner listening, an entrepreneur? Because there's way too much reliance on like the super easy, I'm going to go out and raise venture capital. I'm going to go out and raise angel investment. I'm going to do what I see on Shark Tank. I'm going to do what I read about in TechCrunch. There's so many creative ways to finance. I did something very similar to this in one of my previous businesses, and you know what? It worked. Was it a little bit risky? Yeah, it was, but you get out of that situation as fast as you can. You don't do it when you have a lot to lose, right? In the early days, it's move fast and break things. In the later days, it's be a little more conservative because you got a bunch of stuff you don't want to break anymore. So after this 2005, the Hurricane Katrina comes in, he actually smoothed out his cap table at that point, his debt structure. And so at that point, he wasn't doing this kind of risky borrowing anymore, but he was able to scale very quickly between the starting point and then with this more aggressive fundraising strategy. So I think you could actually take this funding strategy and do something very similar. Rewind the tape, listen to what I said, how I described it. And if you're a small business, you could use the exact same strategy. This is not financial or accounting or legal advice. I'm just telling you what I've done. I'm telling you what Todd did. Do it at your own risk. Do your research. But this is how you do it in the early days. I want to talk a little bit about the community strategy a bit more because I talk about community a ton at Influicity. We help brands build communities that drive a ton of revenue. And what I love about this is that Todd is just speaking to his audience. You know, all those people who think fried chicken's bad for you, I hate fried chicken, you shouldn't have fried chicken. There's an equal number of people, maybe more on the other side, who are saying, I love fried chicken. I have it as a snack, I have it as a treat, maybe I have it as my daily meal, to each his own. And so building a community around something that some people love and some people hate is a really powerful way to build a community. Polarization works. And fried chicken's a great example. People want their fried chicken. And you know what? They don't want other people telling them that they can't have fried chicken. So he went ahead and built these communities around these different groups. I mean, college students for sure love their fried chicken. Church groups love their fried chicken. Families want to go out and enjoy some fried chicken. Little league teams want to enjoy some fried chicken. Foodies, there are so many foodies who go these days on Instagram to Raising Cane's and talk about what they're ordering and take photos of it. And it's like a place to go and something to do. So the community growth around how they're doing it at Raising Cane's is very, very cool. And let's end off here on the best point of all, guys, and that's the simplicity of this business. There's no fancy technology. There's no fancy investors. There's no big, crazy idea. There's just a phenomenal entrepreneur with relentless execution, persistence, a belief in an idea, incredible hustle, incredible grit. That's what entrepreneurship is all about. That's what growth is all about. And that's what success looks like. Guys, get me at jondavids.com. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment wherever you're listening to this. And I'll talk to you guys next time.